What you like this one? How is it? Okay, no, it's fine. I don't. Okay, you're ready to begin.
Okay, we're on Mem Hey Amin Aleph, Yaakov. Mem Hey Amin Aleph.
Okay.
Okay, we're about 6 lines from the top. I think 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Yeah, in the middle of the line. Amalei Abayla of Yosef. My chos is to consider lokeach. Why is it the lokeach gets shafted over here? You had somebody in Chutz La'aretz who bought a slave for an Evet Knaini from the master who lived in Eretz Yisrael. So the person who paid the money loses his money and he has to write a shtar shikra for the slave to go free. Why does he get punished? You can't say the mochel. Let the mochel get punished that he shouldn't get his money. So Amalei Labach Bara Gana Belachura Gana said that when a mouse steals a piece of cheese, so it's not really the mouse that's to blame; it's the little hole the side of the wall when Jerry runs with a piece of cheese into the hole. So don't blame Jerry, blame the hole. So Amalei Milava Achbara Kumaminale. So he said, what are you talking about? If not for Jerry, who cares about the hole? It was Jerry who took the piece of cheese. It's the mouse. So we say no, even though there is such a good retort, wherever the Yisr is standing, namely the person who actually is holding the Evid, who is the one who caused the Eved to be transferred from Eretz Yisrael to Chutz La'aretz. So he's the one who should be penalized. Therefore, since it's in the possession of the Lokeach, the Eved is in the possession of the Lokeach, that's why the Lokeach gets penalized. How Abda Dark Chutz La'aretz, there was an Eved Knaini who ran away from Chutz La'aretz, from Chicago to Eretz Yisrael. So Azam Maria Basre, so the master in Chicago said, hey, come on, I'm not going to be able to keep up with my wealthy friends. I need you to come back to me. Also the Kame to Rabbi Ami, they went in front of Rabbi Ami, said, what should I do? So Amalei Niktav Lach Shtara Adame, have the Evid write a star, a bill of he should write a bill of indebtedness to pay you the amount of money that he's worth. So they get to the Cherusa and write him a bill of emancipation below, because if you don't allow him to write a document of indebtedness, an IOU for his value, that I'm going to invoke the halacha of Rabbi Yachi Rabbi Yoshi, and I'll let him go free without paying you anything. So it's better you should let him go free, and he'll just write that he owes you the money of whatever his value is that shall be paid at a later date. The Tanya, because we have a brisa that's eventually going to lead us to the Shita Rabbi Yachi Rabbi Yoshia, who says that an Eved who runs away from Chutz La'aretz, Chicago or elsewhere to Eretz Yisrael gets to go free. The brisa says as follows: you can't allow the Shiva Umos, the 7 nations of idolaters who lived in the land of Eretz Yisrael, so you can't allow them to remain there because they may cause you to sin. You might think that this would also apply to a non-Jew who accepted upon himself not to worship idols. We have a separate pasuk that says no, that in such a case, although Saskir Eved Aladonov, that you're not allowed to send back a servant, Asher Yinatzil Elecho, who comes to find refuge with you, Me'im Adonov. What do you do with such a person? The pasuk goes on to say, the psukim go on to say, we're going to allow such an individual. There, we're talking about somebody who's finding refuge with you, who is running away from his previous religion, running away from idol worship. We have to allow such a person to remain with you. Bekashalei to Rabbi Yoshia. So first, Rabbi Yoshia had a kasha with this drasha. He said, well, if the idea is that the person's running away from his idolatry, it shouldn't say Me'im Adonav, it should say Me'im Elohav, I should say. Hi, Me'im Adonah, Me'im Elohav, Mi Ba'ilei. Ella, here with the text we have is Avi, but it really should be Elohav. Ella Rabbi Yoshia, rather Rabbi Yoshia says, here we're talking about, the pasuk is speaking about an Eved, who is going away from his master. Mocha Abdul the Chutz La'aretz custom midabi. You have an Eved Knaini who's able to fulfill certain mitzvahs while he's in Eretz Yisrael. You're taking him away from those mitzvahs by selling him to another master outside of Israel, so he gets to go free. Bekashalei Rabbi Yachi Rabbi Yoshia. It sure is, and that's what the kasha of Rabbi Yachi Rabbi Yoshia says. He says that the wording of the pasuk doesn't fit well within Rabbi Yoshia's explanation. That should then the pasuk shouldn't say he's running to find refuge with you. It should be he's finding that he's running away from you. Me'imach, Here it says Elecha. It sounds like he's coming from outside of Israel to Israel. Rather, Rabbi Yaakov Rabbi Yoshia says that what we really learn from this pasuk is exactly this din, that if the Eved ran away from Chutz La'aretz and went to Eretz Yisrael, then he gets to go free. The Eved shebarach mechutz la'aretz, he's finding refuge with you. Namely, where do you, the Jewish people, live? You live in Eretz Yisrael, accustomed to Daber. So Tanya Yidach. So another brisa says, Losaskir Eved el Adona. We have a shita here of Rebbe. Rebbe teaches the pasuk that you're not allowed to return the slave to his master. Rebbe Omer. Rebbe says this is talking about a very specific case where a person purchased an Eved for the purpose of emancipation. Lokeach Eved amanas l'shachro accustomed to Daber. You bought a slave for the purpose of letting the slave go free. Hechidami, what's the scenario? Amar Nachman bar Yitzchak, the custom lay that you wrote out to the person, to this Eved, and the star you said, Hachi, when I'm going to purchase you, you say to this Eved, I'm going to purchase you a weekend from now, a month from now, you're going to be free from this very moment, retroactively. So Abchista Arak Le'Avdil Lebei Kutai. Abchista had a case where his Eved, he had an Eved Knaini. Abchista lived in Babel, in Chutz La'aretz. So the Eved ran to a settlement of Kutim, but it was also in Chutz La'aretz. He didn't run from Chutz La'aretz to Eretz Yisrael. He wasn't sold from Eretz Yisrael to Chutz La'aretz. He just ran from one territory in Chutz La'aretz to the other territory, right? So Shalach Lahu, so he wrote to the people in the other territory. He said, I want my slave, Dred Scott, whatever, Hajuani Ali, please return him to me. I want him back. So Shalkulei, so they said, no, what are you talking about? He's a slave who ran away. Don't you know the fugitive slave law in the Torah? Torah says, that you're not supposed to return a slave to his master. You can skip the parentheses. So Shalach Lahu, so Chisda wrote back, oh no, that's not what the pasuk means. So look at the original intent. We're talking about a slave who ran away from Chutz La'aretz. Here we just ran away from one territory in Chutz La'aretz to another territory in Chutz La'aretz. The pasuk really comes to mean, according to what we just said, it's Rabbi Yaakov, Rabbi Yoshia, that if an Eved runs away from Chutz La'aretz to Eretz Yisrael, you have to let him go free. So, but not in my case, you got to return him to me. So why did he give them the drasha of Rabbi Yaakov, Rabbi Yoshia? Ma'ishnat the Shachu, the Rabbi Yaakov, Rabbi Yoshia. He could have just said that the pasuk comes to teach me that it's talking about the case of Rebbe. A person buys a slave for the purpose of emancipating him. So he's saying pride, because that's the way that the pasuk made more sense. When you read the words of the pasuk, that's what it sounds like. That I have a slave who runs away from one place to another place. He's wanting to take refuge with you in Eretz Yisrael. They can understand that. Rebbe's pshat is a little bit harder to understand within the wording of the psak. Abaye Yerkes Leicham Beik Kutai. On the subject of Beik Kutai, so Abaye lost the donkey. He ran away to the Beit Kutai, to the village of the Kutim. So Shalach Lahu, so he sent away to them. He said, send me back my donkey. Shadru Ali, send the donkey to me. So Shalach Lahu, they said, don't you know the laws of a Shabbos of Eidah? We need a simon. Shalach Simana. So Shalach Lahu, so he said, oh, I'll tell you about my donkey. Zechiver Krise, he has a white stomach. He has a white belly. So Shalach Lahu, so they said, all the donkeys have white bellies. He loved the Nachmaniat, if not for the fact that you're Nachmani. Abaye's name was Nachmani. Remember, Rabbi Bar Nachmani raised him, so he could be gave him the name Nachmani, or maybe his name was really Nachmani, and Rabbi Bar Nachmani called him Abaye, so she shouldn't call him by the name of his father. If not for the fact that you're Nachmani, we wouldn't have sent this donkey back to you. Don't you realize that all the donkeys have white bellies? So maybe because he was a Talmid Chacham, it's kind of like a Tfias Ayin kind of thing. Anaya Mishnah imposing as a shuyim yesat today demand. Somebody's taken captive. We don't ransom the captive for more than the value of the captive. The captive is worth $100,000, and they're saying we want $1 million. You don't pay $1 million because of the fact that it is for the betterment of society that you don't overpay for captives, because then the hijackers are going to take more captives, and they're going to insist on too much money. This is a very hot issue in Eretz Yisrael when it comes to ransoming captured soldiers who are taken by the terrorists and paying, freeing terrorists from jail and paying really an exorbitant price. To what degree do we do that? And we also don't enable captives to run away, because then that's going to cause the captors to treat them future captives more savagely by chaining them on their ankles and things of that variety. So either it's because of Tikkun Olam that it's going to cause them to take be harsher with respect to the future. Rabbi Shimon Gamliel says maybe it'll cause them to be harsher with respect to the other captives. If there are other, you're going to ransom, you're going to enable one captive to escape, so they're going to be much tougher with respect to the other captives. Yes, Eddie.
Yeah. So going back to what we held before, if Evan runs away
Yeah.
from Eretz Yisrael to Chutz La'aretz, we free him.
If an Eved is sold, no, not run away. If an Eved runs away from Chutz La'aretz to Eretz Yisrael, we free him. If an Eved is sold from Eretz Yisrael to Chutz La'aretz, he also gets freed. Then we require the purchaser of the Eved in Chutz La'aretz to free him. When it comes to the Eved running away, we free him if he runs away in one direction, namely from Chutz La'aretz to Eretz Yisrael. So then we free him. Gemara says, what do you mean tikkun olam? The idea is that we don't want the tzibur to have to pay an exorbitant price. So why do you say tikkun olam? So we say mishum doka de siburahu. When we say tikkun olam, do you mean that it's because we don't want the community to have to pay an exorbitant price? Or Dilma mishum delo the gabi relaisu train. Or is it that we're worried that they're now going to take more captives because they see that they can get such an exorbitant price? So they're now going to capture more people. What's the difference? So Tashma, the Levi will give you the difference in the following case. The Levi bar darga parka lebate b'tleiser alpha dinri zahor. The Levi bar darga, he ransomed his daughter with 13,000 tablets of gold. So that's an exorbitant price. Amar Abaye. So Abaye says, so that would seem to indicate that it's based on dochkat tzibura. We don't want to excessively tax the community. But if a family member wants to pay an exorbitant price, it's fine. We're not worried about the capturing of a future victims. So Amar Abaye, that's not necessarily the case. It could be that what Levi did, was against the will of the Chachamim. Maybe he went against the will of the Chachamim. So it's not a raya. It could be that we are worried about the garbu that we're worried that they're going to capture more hostages in the future and charge an exorbitant sum. The Tosfos over here says that it's different if you're dealing with either yourself or your wife. So if a person is ransoming themselves, they're allowed to pay an exorbitant sum, and the same is true with respect to their wife. Or if you're dealing with somebody who's like a tremendous Talmud who has great value for the tzibur, brings a raya from the case of Rabbi Yeshua ben Hananya, who rescued a particular tinok, I think it was Rabbi Yishmael and Elisha, when he saw that this tinok had tremendous potential for the future. All of that is codified in the Shulchan Aruch. We also don't enable the hostages to run away because of tikkun olam. So Rabbi Shimon ben Gamliel, Rabbi Shimon Gamliel says, no, we're worried about the other captives. So what's the nafkamina between these two different opinions of the Tanna Kama? Rabbi Shimon ben Gamliel, my binayo, he can benay like elachad. The nafkamina would be that if there's only one captive, according to the Tanna Kama, he's worried about future hostages, how they're going to be treated. But according to Rabbi Shimon ben Gamliel, he's only worried about the present hostages who are together with this hostage. So if there's only one, he can enable him to escape. The daughters of Rav Nachman would engage in some sort of a Shakespearean witchcraft, where they would say toil, trouble, and trouble, or whatever, and they would take their fingers without even gloves, and they in a hot cauldron, and they would stir the meat inside of a hot cauldron without getting burnt. So Kashlei Rav Elish. So Rav Elish didn't know what was going on. Are they really such a nashim tzidkarios? You can find out of 1,000, one man was a tzaddik, but a woman forget about it. So he's thinking, how could Koheles have said such a thing? Aika ban said Rav Nachman. The daughters of Rav Nachman must be such a tzaddikios that they can not get burned when they're stirring the hot meat in the boiling hot cauldron. So Gamalu Milsa. So then something happened, and this was all to bring out that they really were little witches. Ishtabion, that they were all taken captive. Ishtabayu nami ba'adayo, and he was taken captive together with them. What do you know? Yom echad of Yosef Gabayau Gaba. There one day there was a fellow who appeared together with Elish at the Havayada Elish the Tzipori, and he knew how to interpret the language of birds. When birds are chirping away, they're actually saying something, but most people don't know what they're saying. So Asa Orva, so there was a raven. You can't hark the raven nevermore. You can't necessarily trust the raven. You know, Noah couldn't trust the raven. He couldn't get him to do his bidding. The Kakari lay, and he's, and he's crowing away. So Amalei, my comer. So Village said to this other fellow, he said, who is in captivity with him, what is the raven saying? Hark the raven. So Amalei, Ilish, Barach, Ilish, Barach. The raven saying, Ilish, you can run away, you'll get away with it. So Amaorva Shikvahu, he says, the raven's a liar. You can't trust ravens. Just like Noah couldn't trust him, I'm not going to trust the raven either. The Yonah, then a Yonah came along. Obviously, you could trust the Yonah. We all know that. The Karkarya and the Yonah is chirping away. So Amalei, so Ravilich said to the other fellow, my Kama, what is the Yonah saying? So Amalei, Ilish Bach, Ilish Bach. The Yonah is also saying, the Ilish, run away, you can get away with it. So Amai says, so Knesset Yisrael Yonah Mesila. The Jewish people is compared to a Yonah. We see from here that a miracle is going to happen for me if I run away. I'm a Izil, actually, Bante to Rav Nachman. So he said, I'm going to check out the daughters of Rav Nachman. So once I'm running away, if they're really Sadiqios, so then I'll take them with me. So I'm in a sheikh says the women, they all talk to each other in the bathroom. So I listen to what they're saying to each other in the bathroom. Shaminu de Kaaman, he heard that in the bathroom they were saying to each other, you know what? He says that these new people, the captors, they're like our husbands. And back in Hardah, where we used to live, so we have husbands over there. But these guys are just as good as our old husbands. We want to stay with the captives. We like them. So we're going to tell our captors they should take us far away from here so that our husbands in Hardah shouldn't run after us since they know that we are close by and they're going to ransom us. We don't want to be ransomed. We want to stay with these guys. So we see that they were cavorting with the captors in a way that was baratzon, and therefore they were really not so good, not such good women, and that they would be prohibited to their husbands anyway. So come Arak. So Ilish ran away without taking the daughters of Rav Nachman with him. So he took the other fellow went with him. The only problem is the owner didn't say that the other fellow could run away. So therefore, so Ravilish had a miracle occur to him that he was able to get away with running away. He was able to go over a rickety bridge and escape. But the other fellow who knew how to speak the bird language, so they captured him, the katu, and they killed him. So then finally the Benosa of Nachman from Maharshah says against their will, they were actually ransomed and they came back to their husbands, even though they would have been more than happy to stay with their captors. So Abilich said, you can't trust these women. These girls are no good. The fact that they were able to stir the cauldron without getting burnt, it wasn't because they were tzedekiyos, it's because they were a bunch of witches. Okay, end of story. Mishnah. Not allowed to purchase when, let's say, that there are Sfarim, Sifrei Torah, the tefillin and mezuzahs, they make it into the hands of the non-Jews. So how much are you supposed to spend in order to ransom these objects? Well, you should spend a decent amount, whatever they're worth, maybe a little bit more, we'll see, but not an exorbitant amount either. Yosef, and you shouldn't pay an exorbitant amount. We're turning the page, Yaakov, and now we're Memheo and base. Because of Tikkun Olam, for the betterment of society, either because it's not fair to impose such a high cost, or because they're going to steal other Sifrei Torah, Tefillim, and Zuzas, because they know they can get a high price. Rashi says either svara would apply here too. Gemara says, Amalei Rabudia the Ravashi. Yes, however, the Mishnah indicates that you would spend the amount of money that these items are worth. They have a Sefer Torah in their possession that's worth $25,000. You give them the $25,000. Shema Mina. We see from here that it has some value. That a Sefer Torah Shenimsa B'yad Ovi Kocharim, a Sefer Torah in the hands of Ovi Kocharim, you're allowed to use and we're not worried that maybe he wrote it for purposes of idolatry. Kohen Mo. So Dima Lignos, we say not necessarily. It could be that you purchase it because you're worried that maybe it's kosher, but maybe it's really puzzle. Maybe it was written for purposes by him, for purposes of idolatry, and we just buy it to store it away, but not necessarily that we're comfortable using it. I'm Rav Nachman, Naktidan. Rav Nachman says, here are the principles that are followed over here. Sefer Torah shekasa min. If you have somebody who's a min, who is an apostate who worships Avodah Zarah, and he wrote a Sefer Torah, so then you have to assume that he wrote it for idolatrous purposes, and you burn it. Even though it's a Sefer Torah with God's name, it has no kedusha. You burn it. You sorry. If a stam goy wrote it, so maybe he wrote it that he had in mind that he wants it to be used by Jews, and he had in mind that he's writing it for the purpose of a Kadosh Baruch Hu, and for monotheism. So therefore, yiganes, you don't burn it, but you do store it away. You can't read from it either. Let's say that we don't know who wrote it. Maybe a regular Jewish sofer wrote it, but now I found it in the possession of a heretic. Yiganes, if it's in the possession of a heretic, so then you store it away. You bury it. If you find it in the possession of a non-Jew, an idolater, so some say yiganes, some say that you store it away, you bury it. And some say no, you can actually read it. Rashi says maybe because it was written not l'shem avodas kochavim, maybe the non-Jew wrote it for Hashem's name. Tosfos says no, but we're going to see later on that it could be that even if the non-Jew had proper intent, since it says ukshartim uksaftam, that it has to be only a person who is included in the mitzvah who has the ability to write tefillin, mezuzos, or sifrei Torah. So therefore, by definition, it's possible. But the reason why some say you can read it is because why would they write a Sefer Torah? They don't know how to write a Sefer Torah. The assumption is that a proper from Jewish sofer wrote the Sefer Torah. That's why you'd be allowed to read from it according to that opinion. That's how we generally assume in Shulchan Aruch that would be the svara, not like Rashi says. Sefer Torah shekasa ovei kochavim. Let's say the Sefer Torah was written by Ovei kochavim. That's exactly what we're discussing. What would be the status of that Sefer Torah? Tani chada yisaret. According to one Tana, you burn it because you assume it was written for idolatry. But Tanya idach yiganes. A second brisa says that you store it, you bury it. Maybe it wasn't written for idolatry purposes, but still not kosher to read from, so therefore you can have to bury it. The Tanya idach, and a third brisa says korinbo, that you're even allowed to read from it. So how do we reconcile these three different brisos? Lokasham, had the Tanya yisaret, the brisa, the opinion who said, and the Tanaim who says you burn it is Rabbi Eliezer. So Amar Rabbi Eliezer is of the opinion that Stam Aksheres of Avodas Kochavim, that a non-Jew who writes a Sefer Torah, you can presume that he wrote it for idolatrous purposes that has no kedusha. It's the antithesis of kedusha. You burn it. The High Tanya Yiganes, and the second brisa that says you bury it, you store it away. High Tanahu is going like the following Tana. The Tani Rav Hamnuna Breder Rava Pashrunia. Pashrunia is a makom. So what did he say? He said, Sefer Torah, if you have a Sefer Torah, or tefillin or mezuzos for that matter, shekasava, and it was written by either a min, a heretic, umasar, some don't have that here, so umasar, or somebody who is an informer, ovei kochavim, it was written by a goy, an idolater, the eved, or was written by an eved, somebody who doesn't have kedushas Yisrael. Isha is written by a woman who doesn't have the mitzvah of putting on tefillin because there's a kshatim ksaftim. The katan was written by a katan who's not yet a bar mitzvah. The kuti, or is written by a kuti based on the assumption that they're not considered to be kosher converts. Yisrael Mumar, or it's a Yisrael who has repudiated his religion. So all of these people, if they wrote a Sefer Torah, it would be pasul. We don't say it gets burnt, but we say it's pasulin. It would be invalid because Shnei Mar, as the pasuk says, that only somebody who's included in the mitzvah of keshira, of wearing tefillin, is somebody who can write these holy items. Only somebody who's in the mitzvah of tefillin is able and identifies with the Jewish people and is a Jewish person and is a bar mitzvah and so forth, is kosher to write a Sefer Torah, tefillin, or mezuzah. And if somebody who's not included in that mitzvah, eno b'kasiva. Okay, behind the Tanya, and the third brisa that said that you're actually allowed to read the Sefer Torah that was written by an Ovei Kochavim, Karimbo, Hai Tanahu, is going like the following Tana. The Tanya, as the brisa says, Lokin Svarim in Ovei Kochavim b'chol makom. There's a brisa that says a non-Jew is selling a Sefer Torah in his store. So we work with the assumption, as Tosfos says, that he didn't write it, that it was written by a proper sofer and he just got a hold of it. As long as the Sefer Torah is written properly, and in fact there was a ma'aseh. The there was a case of an Oved Kochavim Echad at Seidan. He lived in Seidan. Sheya Kosev Svarim. This is not necessarily a raya because it could be we're only going to be making when he's not a Kosev, when he's just a Mocher. Here they knew that the person was a Kosev. Rabbi Shimon ben Gamliel went so far as to say that you could buy the Sefer Torah. We'll see. The case was a little bit more nuanced than meets the eye. The hit of Rabbi Shimon ben Gamliel, Kach Mimenu. Rabbi Shimon ben Gamliel, Ibu Lishman Bai, Siva Lishman Lo Bai. Rabbi Shimon ben Gamliel, we know that the leather that's used to cover up the bottom of the tefillin have to be tanned, have to be prepared with very specific intent. If I said no, Kochavim writes the Sefer Torah, he's not going to have the proper intent. So how is it that he could have been maksha the Sefer Torah when he even requires that the ibud of the leather that covers up the bottom have to be prepared lishma with specific proper intent? Shouldn't he require the same with respect to the writing of the parshios themselves? The Tanya, we see this opinion of Rabbi Shimon Gamliel because the Brisa says, Sipein Zav, that if you covered up the bottom of the tefillin with gold, you made them gold plated, or you covered them with the skin of a non-kosher animal, that's no good. Sulos, it has to be dafka the skin of a kosher animal. Let's say it is a kosher animal then that I'm using as the ore, I'm using as the leather to cover to make the bottom, the outside of the bottom, or behema tahora, that of course is kasheros. The afapi, according to the Tanakama, even if it wasn't specifically tanned or prepared for the purpose of the tefillin. Shimon Gamliel says, "Oh, what are you talking about? It has to be the shema. Even if it is of the leather, the skin of a kosher animal, it's going to be no good. Unless it's tanned specifically for the purpose of the tefillin. So certainly the ksiva should be specifically for the purpose of the mitzvah. And the Nove Kochavim, we assume, does not accomplish that, right? So Amar Rabba Bashmuel, no, what we're talking about, at least in this case, the Maisa is not talking about an actual Nove Kochavim. It's talking about somebody who went through a conversion. He went through the mikvah over the oversight of the Chicago Rabbinical Council, and then, unfortunately, he went back to his previous ways afterwards. But once you're a Jew all the way, right? To your last dying day, it doesn't matter if you go back. The ger shechaza l'suo. So we say l'suo, kos again mean. What do you mean? He went back to his previous religion, so then he counts as a min. He counts as a heretic. The heretic writes the Sefer Torah for sure. It's no good. We said that earlier. So Amar Abashi, no. Shechoze l'suo mishum yira. He went back to his previous ways, but not because he rejected religion, not because he rejected the Jewish religion, but because he was afraid they were going to kill him. Since it was due to onus, he was like a Marano, that he was afraid that they were going to kill him. Therefore, he's still considered to be a kosher. The Sefer Torah would still be kosher. Tana Rabbanim. They have a brisa that says as follows: Ma'alin b'demeyan. If you have a Sefer Torah tefillin of mezuzahs that fell into the possession of a non-Jew, our Mishnah said you don't ransom them, yosim, if they demand for an exorbitant price, but a little bit extra. Akadei trepik. A trepik is like a little, a kopek. And an extra kopek you could pay more than the actual value. My trepik, Rav Sheshes is stira. It's a small coin, what we call a sela medina. It's 1/8 of what would be a regular shekel. It's 1/8 of that value. So you go a little bit extra above the actual price. So hayitayasa, there was an Arabic woman. She brought a little bag of tefillin boxes in front of Abaye that she wanted to sell. She got them from the Jewish community. She figures that she'll have them held out for ransom, and she'll get a good price. So Amalai says, I'm not going to pay you an exorbitant price. He said, Yavasli, Reish a bit Tamari. So he said that they give it to me. I'll give you some dates. I'll give you some, from the best, dates that I have in the tree. But I'm just going to give you a few dates in return for the tefillin that you have in this bag. So she said, what, for a couple of dates? I don't want to go out with you. Imalia Zira. So she got really, really angry. And Shakla Shatsinu Binara. And she took the tefillin and she threw them into the river, into the raging torrent of the river. So Amaloi Bailey, so he had a karata. So Abaye said, I shouldn't have denigrated it so much. I should have offered her a little bit more than a few dates. I just didn't want to offer an exorbitant amount. So he started negotiating. I'll give you a few dates. But apparently that wasn't good enough. He said, I should have offered a little bit more than that. Says the Mishnah, Moses, if a person divorces his wife because she got a bad name in the community, people are saying that she's an adulteress. Okay, lo yaksir. So then, if after he divorces her, if he has charat, he changes his mind and he wants to remarry her. You know what we say? We're not going to let you. Mishum neder lo yaksir. It's similarly if she's constantly taking the darim, she's prohibiting herself from eating this and that and drinking the other thing and doing anything and going anywhere, and he just can't take it anymore, so he divorces her. So Rabbi Yehuda, so lo yaksir, there too we say he's not allowed to remarry her. What's the reason? We're going to get into the reason in the Gemara. Rabbi Yehuda Omer koned sheyadu b'rabim liyaksir. Rabbi Yehuda says if it's a neder that most people knew about it, so then he assumes that if it was a neder that was made adas rabim, so to speak, that the whole world knows about the neder, then there's no hafara. She'll never be able to nullify it, and therefore he said there's no point to his ever being able to remarry her. But if it is something, a type of neder that it's not known about widely, so then she will be able to nullify it, and then therefore the situation can be remedied. So yaksir, so he can take her back. Rabbi Meir says, Rabbi Meir says that what we're really worried about is that he'll say, oh, had I known that I could have nullified the neder, I never would have divorced you. And then maybe the divorce is considered no good if she married somebody else, and maybe it's adultery and the children are mamzerim. So if it's a type of neder that requires the analysis of a chacham, lo yaksir, because he can say in such a case that I didn't know that a chacham would be able to nullify this neder. But if it's one that doesn't require the involvement of a chacham, so then he would have known that it's something that could have been nullified, so he can't mess her up afterwards. Yaksir, so then he can take her back. So I'm Rabbi Elazar, lo asu zeh el mipnei zeh. So Rabbi Elazar says that we prohibit the case where it does require a chakiras chacham from the case where it doesn't require. Because when it comes to a chacham, we know that a person doesn't want his wife to have to go in front of the best and in front of everybody. So he's not going to say, oh, had I known that you could do that, I never would have divorced you. Because of course he wouldn't want her to do that. But if it is one where she wouldn't have to go out to a chacham, so then he can make the argument, oh, I didn't realize this neder could be nullified, but had I known, and you didn't even have to go in front of a big chacham, then I never would have divorced you. So therefore, that's the case that we really have to prohibit and say that we're not going to allow him to take her back. And therefore, in order to enable this particular case to take hold, so we prohibited him from taking her back in the other case as well. I'm Rabbi Yosef, Rabbi Yehuda. Rabbi Yosef, Rabbi Yehuda said, Ma'aseh b'Seidan. There was a case in Seidan. Ve'echad Seidan, this is our second Seidan story of the day. Ve'echad shama li'ishto, a person said to his wife, Konam im aini megar shayach. He says that I'm taking a neder upon myself, prohibiting everything in the world upon myself, unless I divorce you. So therefore, he felt he had no choice but to divorce her. Begersha, he divorced his wife. Chacham said he could take her back. It's okay. They allowed it because of tikkun olam. What's the tikkun olam? The Gemara is going to explain. Here's the Gemara. I'm Rabbi Yosef bar Minyomi. Rabbi Yosef bar Minyomi said, I'm Rav Nachman, who sham Allah, that it's only when we say that if he divorced his wife because she got a bad name, that's only when he says to her that that's the reason he's divorcing her. Mishum shemra ani motziach. He says, I'm divorcing you because of the shemra. Because then we say, oh, okay, this is a knas, basically, that that she acted so badly that we don't want to let him take her back. Mishum neder ani motziach. Or in the second case, he says, ani motziach, that I'm divorcing you because you two are constantly taking the darim. Kisava, because he held, time of my, what are we worried about? He says, not a knas. Mishum kilkula. We're worried that afterwards he's going to say, oh, had I known that this was a type of case that you had not committed adultery, or that the neder was capable of being nullified, so then I never would have divorced you. And then he's going to make it look like she said, then maybe if she was remarried, he's going to claim that she's committing adultery. So therefore we say to him, when he announces at the time of his divorce that this is the reason that he's divorcing her, we say that that you need to know that you'll never be able to take her back. So then he's not neman to say afterwards, oh, I never would have divorced her, because he understands that even if she doesn't marry somebody else, he's not going to be able to take her back. And he didn't do the appropriate investigation. So he showed that he didn't really love her so much anyway. because he can only say, oh, I never would have divorced you otherwise, if he states at the time that he's divorcing her that this is the reason that he's divorcing her. Well, just in the next line, he get the Rabbi Yosef Amiyomi. Another version of what Rabbi Yosef Amiyomi said is a little bit different, where we say to him that you better tell her at the time in which you divorce her, this is the reason I'm divorcing you. So because according to this svara, the reason why we don't allow him to take her back is not because we're worried he's going to mess her up otherwise, but rather because it's a knas, that she acted so badly that she needs to understand that because of the fact she got a bad name or she was constantly taking the darim, that's why she's not going to be allowed to ever remarry him, and therefore we require that he actually makes that statement because it's a knas. So that's the other version of Yosef Amiyomi Nachman. Sarak Shiyom Allah. We require him to say this. Havei Yodas, you should know Shemishum Shema Ani Motziech, that I'm divorcing you because of your bad name, or because of the fact that you constantly took the darim. Sarah, time of mine. What's the reason we can't take her back? It's a knas. The women should not act this way, that they get a bad name for themselves. Through their relationships with other men who've been in darim, through constantly taking the darim. Therefore, he's required to say this formulation to her, and we'll stop here. Everybody should have a good job.